It's Sunday morning. That's why I said morning. This is March 12th, 2023. My name is Douglas Griffin. Great. And this is my Sunday school class. We're in the book of Exodus. We're in chapter 22 of Exodus. Moses has taken the children of Israel out of Egypt, brought them to Mount Sinai. God is giving his instructions. Um, Our old thinking says God is giving them, He's creating the perfect society exactly how He wants them to be. And that's not true. Uh, these, this society is, after 400 years, it's been 400 years since God spoke to Abraham and saying, I'm going to create a mighty nation. Nation's finally there, but they've spent the last couple hundred years in Egypt learning all the wrong things. So God is treating them like babies and first telling them, here's what's going to keep you alive. These are the first set of rules I'm going to give you are going to keep you alive, and so that your nation continues to exist. And then I'm going to lay the foundation for what's to come, which by the time you get to the time of Jesus, 2,000 years later, is it 1,200 years later, 1,600 years? Anyway, however much later, because David was down. Okay, so 1,200 years from now, I'm going to uh, really expound on it. But and this given this example before, just so we get it in our heads. Just like a parent with a baby, um, you're saying no, don't do this, no, no, because these are the things that will keep the baby alive. So I first have to give you all the do not do this, this will kill you. But when you're feeding a baby, there's a progression, right, where you're teaching the baby to open their mouth and accept food. Um, and then you totally teach that child what are the right things to eat. Then at a certain point, you might teach the child how to cook food themselves. And then eventually, you teach that child how to cook for others. And that may be where you were headed, right? You want to be, but the baby's not ready at that time for you to take the baby over to the skillet and teach them how to fry food. Not as a baby. So they're not ready for that. So God is not teaching them all the things that eventually, the evolution of his law that will eventually come through the Messiah. He's teaching them what they can take at this time, but laying the foundation for things to come. So um, he would have abolished slavery and all those things, but that's not where they were yet. But he still was teaching them to love their neighbor. And then he keeps expanding the definition of the neighbor until he says, love your enemies. And so he continued, that's at the time of Jesus. Oh, okay, so I'm supposed to treat the whole world as my neighbor. I'm supposed to even treat the people who I know are against me, and I'm supposed to love them. All right, but you're not ready to do that as a baby. Okay, so in Exodus chapter 22, we're in Exodus chapter 22, verse 18, starting there. I'm just going to do the second half of Exodus 22 today. It says, you shall not permit a sorceress to live. Hey, Rodney. So here is what's interesting, because it is sorceress, female. The reason sorceress because women were more likely to be in this particular profession. Why? Because women just traditionally are more in touch with the spirit world, the spiritual things. Women are more balanced as far as depending on what your brain is telling me and what your instincts are telling you. They have a balance of that men don't. Um, because God communicates in both ways, right? He'll bring things to your remembrance that He's taught you. You read, He brings those scriptures, but He also communicates with our spirit. You get a feeling about something. I don't feel. I feel like God's telling me this, or you get feelings. That's another way that God communicates, and men traditionally turn that off and don't listen to their feelings. so men cut off a way that God communicates. So now not all men, and obviously men can learn to do that, but men are socialized to ignore their feelings and keep going. We have a joke in our house about the coaches that always say, walk it off. Men are supposed to walk it off. I hurt, just walk it off. But I'm in pain, walk it off. I want to cry right now. Men don't cry. Don't you cry. And so there's a whole section of pain and feeling and stuff that men are socialized to just ignore and keep going. And you're really cutting off a part of a way that God communicates. If you're not listening to your instincts and listening to your body, what it's telling you, that's why men die earlier than women. Women listen to their bodies. Oh, I have a pain here, and men are saying, I don't feel anything. So, so God communicates to our bodies, through our emotions, through our feelings, through our instinct, and through our intellect. All those things. Women just to be more balanced about that. So it says, you should not permit a sorceress to live, because there are spirits in the world that we don't see, right? We're in the just physical realm, but the spirit realm is all around us. There are angels in your room right now where you are. There also may be some demons. So, but we're unaware of them. And one good thing is if you're not communicating with the demons and the angels, then they're probably not communicating with you. So you lose out because, and not again, you're not supposed to be talking to the angels and telling them what to do and all of that. We talk to God, and God sends his angels. He gives his angels charges over us. So there's a whole doctrine about angels. I don't mean you're supposed to be talking to angels and talking to demons. But there are people who do that, who are more aware of the spirit realm, and it tended to be women during this time, more aware of the spirit realm, and they were talking to demons and talking to angels. The angels were saying, "Don't talk to me," and we see that the 2 or 3 places in the Bible where an angel would finally appear in the physical realm. He'd always been there in the spirit realm, and the men would say, "What is your name?" And the angels would say, "Don't ask my name, and you're not supposed to be talking to me. You don't need to know my name. You talk to God. I'm just his servant." So there are women who are talking in the spirit realm and listening in the spirit realm and getting information, and God's way against that because it's a way of going around God. It's a way of superseding his authority, and that seems to be the thing that upsets God the most. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Well, there are no other gods, but you're either going to listen to me or you're listening to the devil. You think that there's a third way. Well, I'm just listening to the world, but the world's controlled by the devil. So if you're choosing not to listen to me on purpose, not you didn't realize, because God's not mad when we're drawn away. He's mad when we go away on purpose. So the sorcerers they're practicing this. This is their profession, right? In Leviticus 19:31, it says, "Give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits." So a medium is literally someone, I'm standing in the middle between the spirit realm and the physical realm. I'm a medium, and I channel these familiar spirits, channel them so that they can talk to us. So you're making yourself available. It says, "Give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits. Do not seek after them to be defiled by them. And the Lord your God." Because anything that's not coming directly from God, that's who we're supposed to be talking to, not angels, not devils, not anything else, is going to lead us in a horrible direction. Anything that's not coming directly from God leads us astray, for sure. So, hold on a second. Why did I do that? There, I'm back. Leviticus 26. Leviticus 20, verse 6. "And the person who turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them." So I put to death sorceresses, a sorceress, because they're leading you into what the devil wants you to do, anti-God, and it's going to kill you. Anything that was going to kill you, like we lock up poisons and we lock up things away from our kids because it's going to kill them. We say no, right? We don't leave it out and try to negotiate it. Try not to eat that Tide Pod, honey. They're going to do it, so you have to put it away because it will kill them. You start dealing with the devil, it's going to kill you. And God's trying to preserve our lives. So I just got to say to no. Got to, and He's doing this to scare people out of becoming sorceresses, right? So the person who turns to mediums and familiar spirits. So not only is the sorceress a problem, the person who turns to them, that person has to, again, just to scare you. Any person who turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them, I will set my face against that person and cut him off from his people. No. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 27. A man or a woman who is a medium or who has a familiar spirit shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones. So they want to make it the most dramatic, scary death. Their blood shall be upon them. Which means in two ways. You have caused other people to go away from God, and you've caused death. Ultimately, you're speeding people's deaths. So that blood that you shed, now your own blood has to be shed. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10 says, there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his sons or daughters pass through the fire, or who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer. So he just makes a list. Book of Deuteronomy is written as they're leaving the wilderness. Book of Exodus is written as they're entering the wilderness. 40 years have gone by. So we see in Deuteronomy, God is 40 years later, he's more specific. So first, just let me say all sorceresses, they can't live. Now let me be more specific 40 years later, since you've been influenced by these other cultures that are also around you in the wilderness, and you fought against the Moabites, etc. And you see what they're doing. I can see how that's seeping now into your culture. So there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire. So that was a practice. You think you would not end up with very many sons and daughters if you did that, but in order to prove how spiritual you were, they would set fires, and they'd make their sons and daughters walk through fire. Some of them would not live, and they go, see, that person, they weren't pure and holy. They were burned to death. And then the ones who were lucky enough to make it out, see, that person, that was so anyone who makes their son or daughter pass through the fire, don't do that. It's a shame that we have to say things like that. I'm laughing because that reminds me of real story. A guy who's mowing his lawn, and he wants to trim his hedges, and he picks up the lawnmower, and he tries to trim his hedges with the lawnmower, and it falls on him and injures him, and he sues the lawnmower maker because there was no warning that you weren't supposed to do that. And so now people have to put ridiculous warnings on things, like it'll say poison, and then it has to say harmful if swallowed. Like you have to tell people, don't ingest this. You'd think that common sense would just tell you that's bad. But something's wrong with us, and we don't use common sense. So God has to say, if they're taking your sons and daughters and putting them in the fire, that's not good. I don't know why you don't realize that's not good. Or anyone who practices witchcraft, a soothsayer, and that's someone who would just say the sooth, they call it the sooth, who would just give a prophecy, but it wasn't from God, it was from a spirit. One who interprets omens, and they would shake things and take bones and do all sorts of, this means any sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist. This is all in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10 through 12. Or one who calls upon the dead. So he just had to spell it out, because just saying, thou shalt not suffer a sorceress to live was not enough. Let me be more specific, because for some reason, I have to be more. So if you talk to dead people, conjure up the dead, calls up the dead, right? You're actually saying, Spirit of Benjamin Franklin, come forth. Okay, that's not good, right? Because then the demons will put on a mask and pretend to be Benjamin Franklin and talk to you and tell you, you know what you should do? You should stand out in the rain and try to do lightning like I did. But this time, bring your son and daughter with you and set them on fire and see what happens. So, for all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. So I'm trying to help you. Help me help you, is what God is saying. 2 Chronicles 33, verse 6. And also he caused his sons to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. Okay, he practiced soothsaying and used witchcraft and sorcery and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. And this is a king that he's talking about in 2 Chronicles chapter 33, who was totally enamored with the customs of these other countries who were doing these things, because people will find a substitute for God. God put this little hole in us that only he could feel. So people, God, he did that on purpose so that we hunger and thirst, right? But if you don't feel it with God, you're going to feel it with something. People have a thirst for knowing that there's a power greater than themselves. They have a thirst for that. So if they don't want to turn to God, they will turn to something else. And so one of the kings saw that happening and said, "Ooh, I like that," and instituted it. So God had to get rid of him. 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 22 says, "Now it happened when Joram saw Jehu." Joram is Jezebel's son, who was king in the north. And Jehu is the man of God sent to tell Joram, your time is up. It says, "Now it happened when Joram saw Jehu, he said to him, 'Is it peace, Jehu?' Or Jehu, however you want to say it. So he answered, 'What peace, as long as the harlotries of your mother Jezebel and her witchcraft are so many?'" So along with just being a horrible person and executing prophets all the time, Jezebel's practicing witchcraft. Now, we're going to talk about leaders soon. These are the leaders that God are against, who are openly rebelling against God. Not they're raising taxes on the top 10% bracket or on the lower 10%. That's just a disagreement over policy. We want to call those people horrible. Oh my God, I can't believe that they lowered that rate 2%. They're the worst people. Nah, God's not mad at those people. People who are openly, and you saw them, not that you read on the internet, but who are openly defying God and cursing God and saying, "No, I will serve the devil," doing it, going on television announcing that. Those are the people that God's against, not the people who are instituting some tax policy we don't like. Exodus chapter 22, verse 19. So these are three. First is, "I won't suffer a sorceress to live." Second is, "Whoever lies with an animal, so shall he be put to death." It's amazing that God has to put that out there, because you would think, but for some reason, that's not where we're at. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 23. "Nor shall you mate with any animal to defile yourself with it, nor shall any woman stand before an animal to mate with it." So the assumption that God was talking to men, and then he realized, well, let me add this thing about women, because that tends to be a man thing. But for some reason, okay. So, "Nor shall any woman stand before an animal to mate with it. It is perversion. Do not defile yourselves with any of these things, for by all these the nations are defiled." Like other nations are doing that, which I'm casting out before you. This will kill you. This will kill you. So there are diseases we have today that have come from interesting things like this. And it's like, this will wipe you out. So God is not choosing, you know what, I just don't like purple, so I'm going to say, don't wear purple. These are the things that will kill you that I'm telling you not to do. "If a man mates with an animal," Leviticus chapter 20, verse 15. "Then a man mates with an animal, he should be put to death, and you shall kill the animal." Because something's wrong with the animal, that the animal went, okay. "If a woman approaches any animal and mates with it, you shall kill the woman and the animal." Because now the animal's done that, the animal's going to say, that wasn't that bad. So you got to kill them both. They should be put to death. Their blood is upon them. It's their own fault what's going to happen to them. Again, they didn't see a lot of this, but apparently it happened. But let me say you'll die so that people won't do it. They'll be scared to do it. God has to say, because I have a friend who makes fun of the Old Testament. Oh yeah, but all that stoning and stuff. It was not just people stoning because you ran a red light, or it's like, oh, in the Bible they kept. These were the things that were going to. There are diseases that are going to wipe out hundreds of thousands of people. So I've got to stop that one person from doing it. I got to threaten to stone that person so that they won't do it because you don't understand what you're going to be doing to everybody else. So these are like, again, with the child, you got to go, no, no, and you got to slap that hand so that they understand, do not eat that knife, right? Oh, you're so mean. No, I'm trying to save my child's life. Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 21. Cursed is the one who lies with any kind of animal. So he had to add, because people were, well, God didn't mean that animal, because that one's cute. Nope, any kind. And the people shall say, amen. So by the Deuteronomy, again, 40 years later, he starts these laws in Exodus. By the time he gets to Deuteronomy, he has to be more specific, because apparently just saying, don't lie with an animal wasn't enough. I have to now lay it out for you, because people in their minds try to get around things. So that was the second one. Witchcraft, bestiality, and then idolatry. Those are the three things that God said, these will kill you. So in Exodus chapter 22, verse 20, so we went to 18, 19, 20. He who sacrifices to any god except the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. Witchcraft, bestiality, idolatry. These are the three things that going after these things will totally pervert your brain, your sense of what's of right and wrong, and it will bring death back to the people. And God's trying to preserve these people because I've got to bring the Messiah out of these people. So this group of people has to stay alive. A lot of groups came and went. The Philistines don't exist anymore, even though the Palestinians want to say that the Philistines were their relations. They're not. But they claim that. There are whole groups, Hittites, and that just were wiped away. And so the Jews could have been one of those groups that just no longer existed. So God's saying, do these things and it will preserve you and you'll be alive 2,000 years from now so the Messiah can come from you, right? So these are not negotiable. We'll get more subtle later, but for now, these are no's. So he who sacrifices to any god except to the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. That's in Exodus. Here's a Deuteronomy version of that same thing where God, again, 40 years later, after them being exposed to all these other civilizations and picking up their habits while they're in the wilderness, before they cross over into the promised land, he's more specific, because he has to be more specific. So Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 1 says, if there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass, of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods. So both things have to be true. It's not wrong to dream dreams. It's not wrong if God uses you and somehow a miracle happens. He's saying if you're dreaming dreams, and you get a sign and wonder, but what he has said is let us go after other gods, right? So all those things have to be happening. He says, and the sign comes to true. So he says, let us go after other gods which you have not known and let us serve them. And you're willing to do it because you saw the sign or wonder, and we are susceptible to signs or wonders. He says, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, because the clue is they said, let us serve other gods. You know, this Ashtoreth, this Baal, these other gods, they're great. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. So God says, I actually allowed that sign and wonder to happen because I already told you that if somebody says, let's go after other gods, to ignore them. So if they perform some sort of sign or wonder, I actually let that happen because I already told you what to do. So if the sign or wonder is what's attracting you and you're not listening to the words, they've said, let's serve Baal, and you thought, you know what? A Baal worshiper said something the other day that made all the sense in the world. If they said that and you went, yeah, I might do that, then clearly you don't love the Lord your God. So I allowed the sign or wonder to happen because I'm testing you to see, are you going to ignore everything I said? I brought you out of Egypt, did all these miracles, fed you with manna, and this person did this little miracle and said, let's go serve Baal. And you went, okay. I let that happen. And so we think that, oh, people of God do miracles and it's the devil, there's no miracle. And God's like, no. I there are times I let that happen because I already gave you instruction. I already told you yes or no what to do. Do not be fooled by that miracle. So I allowed that to see because the test is for you. You know, teachers on tests will give true false answers. So they'll teach you during class, George Washington is the first president of the United States. Then on the test, it'll say Abraham Lincoln was the first president of the United States, true or false. Now I've told you the answer. I'm testing you to see, were you listening when I gave that answer? Were you taking it in? Did you believe me? So I put this other thing because you're supposed to say, well, that's not true. I already know what the answer is. The teacher already told me. Right? So we have all these tests all the time to see, were you listening? Did you believe me? So God's saying, I gave you a true false answer. Yes, that miracle happened. I did it to test you. I allowed that to happen to see. So that's going to draw you away from me. You see what's drawing you away from that you're more excited by the sign or the wonder than you are about my word. So you don't really love me with all your heart. You love the signs and the wonders. So that's why today people are drawn away by miracles. People are drawn away by prophecies. There are people giving prophecies in the church. This is going to happen and that's going to, it's very dramatic. And people are applauding and are excited by these prophecies. God's already told you one thing, but these prophets have come out and said something different because people are more excited by the prophecy. They're more drawn to the spectacular and the dramatic, and they don't love the Lord their God. Because if you're actually praying and listening to God, then he's telling to you, he's already telling you what's going to happen. He's already put it in his word. But this prophet said, I had someone come up to me the other day and said, oh, a prophet told me, blah, 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 and I thought, and you believe that? That's not in the Bible. Well, the prophet said, I'm going to grow a third head or something, right? It was something crazy. A third one. Okay. So the person with two heads came up to me. No. So you think, that's not in the Bible. But it was a prophet said. It said, and I told this person, you got to be in the Bible. You got to read the Bible so that you're not drawn away by false prophecies. If you think you're supposed to be a prophet yourself someday and all, then you have to read the word and be really anchored in that. So you'll know if a familiar spirit, if somebody else is speaking to you, this is how you'll know. So God's already spelled everything out and gave us this big book called the Bible. And so if somebody comes to you and tells you something, Jesus is coming on Thursday, even though the Bible says no man will know the hour. Well, God told me the hour. And so it's good. So God allows that person to speak to you to see, do you love the Lord with all your heart? Are you reading his word? Are you listening? Are you susceptible to anything anybody says? Even though I've said the opposite in the Bible, you're just excited by cool things. So you're not really loving me, you're loving the cool things. You came to the church because of the cool things, not because of the love for me. So you're easily drawn away by the next cool thing. So he says, just know that I allowed that I'm testing you. Verse 4 of Deuteronomy 13, Deuteronomy chapter 13. Again, Deuteronomy is expanding on the things that were in Exodus. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. Right? He's reiterating this instruction. Don't be so excited by all these spectacular words and things that you are ignoring God. Verse 5, but that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death because he has spoken in order to turn you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to entice you from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk. So you shall put away the evil from your midst. Right? So here's the purpose. This person is actually drawing you away. If your brother, verse 6, this is Deuteronomy chapter 13. If your brother, the son of your mother, just to be clear, your son or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is as your own soul, like this your best friend, secretly entices you, saying, let us go and serve other gods. So I don't care who it is. It could be your brother. It could be your best friend, your wife, your children. If they entice, we've gone beyond the Bible. There's all this other great stuff out there. Okay. So they say, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near to you, are far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. You shall not consent. So I had to be real specific, God saying, from any end of the earth. It doesn't matter. Yeah, but he never said from the east. Okay, from any end of the earth. But you shall surely kill him. Okay, verse 8 says, you shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, or nor shall you spare him or conceal him, but you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So you kill him together, and then I want everybody to stone him, because I need everybody to know this is going to kill the people. This person who's saying, let's go serve other gods, it's going to make you do things that will end up in your death. So you have to kill that person. Right? It's like you have to vomit out the poison. And you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. So all Israel shall hear and fear, and not again do such wickedness as this among you. So it's not, again, it wasn't that God was just willy-nilly. If you trip, you got to be stoned. If you burp, you got to be, stone him. It was reserved for witchcraft, idolatry, and bestiality. These are the things that will destroy the people. So I've got to make these things really, you got to fear them and know death results. Now come the laws, and it goes from Exodus chapter 22, verse 21 to Exodus chapter 23, like verse 13. They bookend we're using the same words, where this is up to your conscience. There's no penalty of death. I'm just telling you don't do this, and you need to know that I'm watching. So these don't carry a penalty where God says, and here's the punishment for it. There's no case law. Verse 21, you shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. This word stranger would be translated resident alien, immigrant to your country. Somebody from another country has come to your country to live. Do not mistreat them. So we have to think, whatever mistreat means. Well, he's going to spell out what mistreat means. So how are we treating people? And this is part of God slowly getting us to first treat your neighbor as yourself. Now people in other cities. Now people from other countries. God is slowly trying to tell us how to treat the world around us. But he knows it has to be bit by bit. First I have to just train you how to treat yourself and how to preserve yourself, keep yourself alive, and then your neighbor, and then the person who's moved in but's from another country. In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 33, it says, if a stranger, and anytime it says stranger, it means someone from another country is now living with you. If a stranger dwells with you in your land, you shall not mistreat him. The stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So however you are treating yourselves, the person who has now come to live with you, but they're from another country, you have to treat him the same way. So if you're able to go to the doctor, they have to be able to go to the doctor. Whatever way you treat them, you can't say, well, I'm sorry, you're from another country, so I know you're bleeding, but we're not going to let you use any of our hospitals because you're from another country. So however it is, whatever it is, maybe you don't allow yourselves to go to the doctor in your country. Okay, then you don't have to worry about them. You can't treat them better than you treat yourselves, but not worse. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 16. Then I commanded your judges at that time, saying, hear the cases between your brethren and judge righteously between a man and his brother, or the stranger who's with him. So I told the judges, hear these cases, and if there's a dispute between you and your brother, you hear it and you judge rightly. Well, what if there's a dispute between you and someone who is now living there but was not originally born there? Same thing. Their cases come before. You don't get to mistreat them and steal their stuff. And, well, you're from another country, so I can sneak over to your house anytime I want to steal your stuff. Nope. If they're living there now, you have to treat them the same way. You shall not show partiality, verse 17 of Deuteronomy 1. You shall not show partiality in judgment. You shall hear the small as well as the great, and you shall not be afraid in any man's presence, for the judgment is God. So don't let anybody intimidate you if they've got a lot of money. The case that is too hard for you, bring to me and I'll hear it. So bring it to God. I'll hear it and I'll tell you, what to do. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 18. He administers justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loved the stranger, giving him food and clothing. So the people that God was always concerned about was the fatherless, because now that if their parents are both dead, the orphan or the fatherless, you can't have these people just living on the street now because there's no one to support them. Widows, in that culture during that time, women did not work. God never said in his word, women, you're not allowed to work. That's just what they did. So if the husband was doing the work and now the husband's gone, you can't allow the widow to starve to death just because she doesn't have the same means of money. And the stranger, someone who's from another land, who's fallen in hard times, who's now living there, got to do the same way. He administers justice for the fatherless, the widow, and love the stranger, giving him food and clothing. Therefore, love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. He just keeps saying that you were in the same position. And we forget that our ancestors came from other countries and came here. So he's saying you were in the same position. How come you're so quickly forgetting that you're in the same position? So in that same way, now new people are coming from another country. They deserve to be treated a certain way. Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 6 and 7. Look, the princes of Israel, each one has used his power to shed blood in you. In you they have made light of father and mother. In your midst they have oppressed the stranger. In you they have mistreated the fatherless and the widow. In Ezekiel was one of the first prophets. Ezekiel and Jeremiah are prophesying to Israel. This is 300 years after David had been king, after they'd been living in the land for a couple hundred years. So 500 years after they'd gone into the land, God is telling them, here's why I'm kicking you out temporarily of Israel. These are the things that you've done. That is why you're going to lose your land for a while. I'm taking you into bondage by the Assyrians and the Babylonians because you have made light of father and mother. So you haven't respected your parents. In your midst, you've oppressed the stranger, and you mistreated the fatherless and the widow. Because you've done these things, that's why. It's because they went to war against the Philistines. No, there's a way I taught you to treat people, you're not doing it. The problem is in the Bible, God says, I'm the Lord, I change not. So if those things bugged him then, they bother him now. He's the same God. He's not, well, that was then. I didn't care how people treated it. God still cares about those things. So we're stuck. Jesus mentioned those things. Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 29. The people of the land have used oppressions, committed robbery, and mistreated the poor and the needy. They wrongfully oppressed the stranger, the immigrant. So I sought for a man among them who would make a wall and stand in the gap before me on behalf of the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found no one. So I'm destroying your land. I'm kicking you out for these reasons. There's no other reasons. Unless God's lying, these are the reasons why they eventually got kicked out of the land, because I told you how to treat people and you didn't treat them that way. It's Exodus chapter 22, verse 22. We'll be done a little bit. You should not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any way and they cry at all to me, I will surely hear their cry. So this is part of the 10 commandments. Obviously, there are other commandments, but the widow or the fatherless is people who have fallen on hard times through no fault of their own. Now, there are things people have done, it's their fault, and there's a certain way you're supposed to treat them. But these people who your husband died in that time, which left you without any means of support, right? There are things that happen today against that you had nothing to do, bank crashes and things that happen that suddenly leaves people out on the street. It was not their fault. There are certain things that were their fault. But for the people that wasn't your fault, right? The fatherless child, suddenly found himself unable to support himself. So whatever the reason is, you found yourself unable to support yourself, especially not your when it's not your fault. It said, if you afflict them in any way, and they cry out to me, I'm going to hear their cry. And my wrath will become hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. So same thing's going to happen to you. Then you're going to be gone, and your wives will be widowed, and your children be fatherless. And so we have to look sometimes and go, wow, look what happened to those group of people. Or look, that's God who had warned them before, and these people knew they were mistreating. I call this, you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. That's what God's teaching, is that if you're a giver and you're giving to people, God blesses you. If you're taking from them, if you're mistreating them, that will eventually come upon you. We want it to happen instantly, but God gives people long space to repent. Eventually it does happen. Bible says, be sure your sin will find you out, and when son of the dark does come into the light. So if you've just had a habit of stealing from other people and they didn't even know it, you find yourself in a situation where your money will be suddenly stolen, right? And you can't go, what happened? In Malachi chapter 3, verse 5, it says, I will come near you for judgment, and I will be a swift witness against sorcerers, against adulterers, against perjurers, against those who exploit wage earners and widows and orphans, against those who exploit wage earners. Okay, so, and widows and orphans, and against those who turn away an alien, because they do not fear me. I've told you not to do this thing, but you think I can't see what you're doing. I don't. So that means that every single alien who comes across the board. So we have to develop policies to help people in some way. We have to figure out how to help people, but we can't be cruel to people, right? So I heard you. I heard somebody, but there's so many people coming across our borders, and yeah. So either we have to figure out, why are they coming across our borders? How can we help those other countries so that not so many people are forced to flee over here? But we can't be cruel to the ones who come over here. Apparently, God has a problem with that. Because they do not fear me, says the Lord of hosts. For I am the Lord, I do not change. Therefore you are not consumed, O sons of Jacob. Because you doing what's right, that's why you're not consumed. It says, I am the Lord, I do not change. So that always makes me nervous. Uh-oh. So these things bothered him then. Again, a swift witness against sorcerers, adulterers, perjurers, those who exploit wage earners, widows and exploit widows and orphans, and against those who turn away an alien, right? For what? It says, I don't change. So he put that there. That makes me nervous. Like, okay, God still feels that way. So we just need to be careful. Are we being cruel? Exodus chapter 22, verse 25. If you lend money to any of my people who are poor among you, you shall not be like a money lender to him. You shall not charge him interest. This is if you lend money to any of my people who are poor among you. So this is specific. Again, somebody is poor, and this is about charging interest. They were poor in the first place, and they're trying to pay you back. Don't make it harder for them to pay you back. But now you owe me, I lent you $100, but now you owe me $200. Well, I could barely. The whole reason I borrowed the 100 because I didn't have that, and I had to work my butt off to pay back the 100, and now you charge interest, and so now I'm still in the same state of poverty that I was So again, that's too poor. Interestingly enough, we do a different thing with interest today as far as the rich, where I'm lending you money so you're going to make money. There are commercial interests today. It's not the same as lending to the poor because this person has a deficit. There are people who are charged interest because the money that you lend to commercial banks or commercial venture is making the money, so you're allowed to make money because they made money. That's different than poor people who are coming to borrow money and you're making money off of their poverty, right? So this is what specifically God is talking about. In Leviticus chapter 25, verse 35, if one of your brethren becomes poor and falls into poverty among you, then you shall help him, like a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with you. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your God, that your brother may live with you. Your point is to help this person live, right? Now, So we create a social net that catches people if they go too far down. That's what the social net is, so they can live and we can balance them out. This doesn't apply to people who take advantage of a system. God sees that. Oh, this person is lying to get the money. Like the people who were taking advantage during COVID. There are people who were out of work who needed help. And there are people who weren't out of work. They just made it their job to pretend like they were out of work so they could get money. God sees that. Eventually, they all get caught. All right. So, to legitimately poor people, it says, you shall lend him your money for usury, not lend him your food at a profit. Says that in the Bible, Leviticus 25, verse 37. Don't make a profit after people who are hurting. It says, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. A lot of these, Tim Chisholm, are signed, I am the Lord your God. I am God. And he signs them that way. So he doesn't put a specific consequence like he did earlier for case law. Here's what you do if someone loses your sheep, you owe him 4. If someone does this, you owe him 5. He was very specific on the remedy. In these cases, he just said, I'm the Lord. Like, I'm watching you. I'm telling you not to do that, and I'm not gonna tell you what the specific consequence is, because this is something that you're doing in private that no one sees that you're doing. It's just between you and that neighbor. I see you though, and I'm the Lord. So he just signs it. I'm the Lord means I am watching you. Exodus chapter 22, verse 26. If you ever take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. So this person has borrowed something. Maybe he's borrowed an oxen to, my oxen died. Can I borrow yours so that I can keep treading out the corn because the harvest is tomorrow? And how I know you're going to pay me back? Here's my garment. The only thing keeping me warm. You can have this. It says, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. For that is his only covering, verse 27 of Exodus chapter 22. It is his garment for his skin. What will he sleep in? And it will be that when he cries to me, I will hear, for I'm gracious. So this man's shivering at night, and don't make someone's life worse. You did that to help the person, but don't do something that makes it worse, right? This is why Jesus was saying, if a man asks you for his cloak, give him your coat as well. He's talking about a poor person. And Jesus is even expanding on it. But we'll get to that. Okay, in Deuteronomy chapter 24, this is just expanding on how to treat the poor when they have to borrow from you. Deuteronomy 24, verse 10. This is when he gets more specific. When you lend your brother anything, you should not go into his house to get his pledge. Don't walk through and say, oh, I lent you something. Well, let me see. That television, I'm taking that. Don't do that. Don't embarrass and humiliate people. Verse 11, you shall stand outside, and the man to whom you lend shall bring the pledge out to you. That's not for you to go in. Let me just be real specific. And if the man is poor, you shall not keep his pledge overnight. You shall in any case return the pledge to him again when the sun goes down, that he may sleep in his own garment and bless you, and it shall be righteousness to you before the Lord your God. So tomorrow you can take it back, but don't let the man sleep, if he hasn't paid you back yet. Let him sleep in his garment. Exodus chapter 22, verse 28. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. And so in Acts chapter 23, verse 5, it says, then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest, Ananias, commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. So Paul is pleading his case. They've seen Paul do stuff that they thought was wrong. But God's like, I've never done anything wrong. And the high priest says, slap him. Paul doesn't know this is the high priest that's doing this. Then verse 3, then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. And he's telling them off. For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? And I'm a Roman citizen. And those who stood by said, do you revile God's high priest? Verse 5, then Paul said, oh, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. He's quoting Exodus 22, 28. If God has put someone in that position, and they're doing what they think is right, not if they've become crazy and are openly worshiping other gods and have gone on television saying, let us all worship Baal, take your children, throw them in the fire. That person you don't have to listen to. If someone is just openly defiant against God and telling you, I'm defying against God, this is not a case of you not agreeing with how they do their policies. Well, I'm not listening to that person because I don't agree with how they do. You have to still respect them because God put them in power and God will deal with them. But you don't have to do something crazy that someone who is now crazy tells you to do. No. But there's a way that God is teaching us, if you don't respect your parents, you ultimately don't respect God. If you don't respect the people above you and understand God has that person in place to help you, then it's going to come on you. It's going to reflect in how you treat God. So you're disrespecting me. In Romans chapter 13, verse 1, it says, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. And the authorities that exist are appointed by God. So if God allowed whoever it is to be in charge, don't spend a lot of time reviling that person. Now you can think in your heart, they don't know what the heck they're doing. And you may be totally right. And God may replace that person. But there's a certain level of respect God wants us to have for people over us because that's showing that we're respecting that God placed that person there. You may think to yourself, they're not long because they're not doing right. But don't show disrespect to those over you because in essence, you're saying, God, you didn't know what you were doing. You telling it's like I put that person in place and I'm watching them, God is saying, and I'm going to deal with that person. So you can just keep your mouth shut and think it and ponder those things in your heart like Mary. This person don't know what the hell they're doing. But don't show that kind of disrespect because ultimately you're telling that to me. And I'm telling you, I'm totally in charge. You don't have to panic in that way. You don't have to freak out in that way. And because I see what's going on. And it's a disrespect to me that you think that I don't see it. Because there's a lot of stuff that we take into our own hands. That's why the Bible said, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. You got to think that I'm seeing this. But if you don't think I'm seeing it, that's why you think, well, I'm going to go tell that person. I'm going to go because you don't think I'm doing it. You don't think I'm doing it. So it's a disrespect to me. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13, it says, therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme, or to governors, or to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. So whatever they're doing, know that God's got it. And so don't openly come at them because unless I tell you to, God sent Elijah to Jezebel to tell her because she was openly just worshiping other gods and stuff like that. So it's not like no authority will ever be challenged. But if they're trying to do what's right and they're messing up, God says, I see that. They won't be there long. They're not going to last. Exodus chapter 22, verse 29. You shall not delay to offer the first of your ripe produce and your juices. So, these are the last verses. God wants the first fruits, so of your produce as an offering, because that again is us telling God wants that 10%, that tithe, because that's us telling God, I trusted you supplying my needs. I'm recognizing that the reason I had this bounty today was from you. And I'm giving this back to you because I trust that you will meet all my needs. It's a sign of our faith to God. That's why we do that. So he says, give me the first, because if you wait till the end, you won't have anything left. So give me the first of you. He says, and the firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. Like, what? What do you mean give to me? The firstborn of the son was made a priest in the family at this time. If the father was to pass away, then the firstborn son became a priest. Now it starts back in Exodus chapter 4, verse 22. This whole firstborn thing. When God says Moses down to Pharaoh, when he's at the burning bush, he says, you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. And God's trying to burn into their consciousness, looking way ahead, 2,000 years ahead, when they're going to reject Jesus. I want to teach them about the firstborn son, and that the firstborn son is the ultimate sacrifice. I want to teach that to them so that when Jesus shows up, they won't reject him, or they won't have an excuse for rejecting him. So say to Pharaoh, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I say to you, let my son go that he may serve me. I'm redeeming the firstborn. But if you refuse to let him go, indeed, I will kill your son, your firstborn. So I have a thing about firstborns. In fact, this is a book called The Curse of the Firstborn that's interesting. And shall come to pass on the way at the encampment that the Lord met him and sought to kill him, sought to kill Moses. Why? Because Moses' firstborn son, he had not sanctified, right? He had not circumcised. So God's already issued a curse on all the firstborn who are not sanctified. Tell Pharaoh all the firstborn will be, and so God can't let Moses take his son to Egypt because he'd fall under the curse. So he stops him right then, and then his wife immediately knows what the problem is and circumcises him because they'd already discussed this, and they were going to wait. And God's like, no, don't wait. Do it now. In Exodus chapter 11, Moses goes and announces to everybody. Moses says, thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who's behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the animals, because I'm teaching you about how important the firstborn is. Then there shall be a great cry throughout the land of Egypt, such as was not like it before me, nor shall it be like it again. But against none of the children of Israel shall a dog move its tongue against man or beast, that you may know that the Lord does make a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. And God has always made a difference between the Egyptians who are worshiping other gods and Israel, which is us, who's worshiping the God. So he's very clear. So he's teaching them about the firstborn and how that one is dedicated to me. I'm claiming the firstborn, he's mine. However, in Numbers chapter 3, verse 12, it says, now behold, I myself have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of every firstborn who opens the womb among the children of Israel. Therefore the Levites shall now be mine. So now that position, as far as the firstborn of the household being the priest for that family, I've chosen the Levites to be the priest. It was supposed to have been Reuben. Reuben was the firstborn, but Reuben defiled his father's bed and slept with his stepmother. Then it was supposed to be Simeon. He was next in line, but Simeon killed Shechem because Shechem had raped Dinah. So now it was to fall on Levite to take the place of the firstborn. So God says, I'm choosing Levite to stand in that position then of the firstborn. And so that I'm teaching you the duty of the firstborn is to go out and sacrifice, represent for the family, and make the sacrifices for sin, etc. Then in John 3:16 it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, my firstborn, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So I'm giving him. So I've been teaching about the firstborn all this time, and how they come and they stand for the family, and they take the sins before God. And now I'm giving you my firstborn, and that's his job, so that you'll recognize it when he comes and does it. When he's on the cross saying, Father, forgive them, you'll go, oh, he's been teaching us for 2,000 years about this. That's the purpose of the Messiah. That's what he's supposed to do. So he mentions it in Exodus because he's starting that teaching thousands of years before Jesus ever shows up. Here's the last two verses. Likewise, you shall do with your oxen and your sheep, the firstborn. It shall be with its mother 7 days, and the eighth day you shall give it to me, the firstborn. And you shall be holy men to me, verse 31. You shall not eat meat torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. So he's teaching them about two things, the firstborn and then the blood. He was very clear. That's why things are kosher. You drain the blood. The blood is for sacrifice. Don't eat the blood because you'll be confused. Now, we don't have to worry about that now because we've already learned the lesson. We understand how important the blood is. But at the time he was teaching them, the blood has significance. The blood has significance. It's the blood that's going to save you. It's the blood that's going to save your sins. It's the blood that I'm giving, that blood sacrifice, because the life of the flesh is in the blood, and so blood must be sacrificed to save your lives. I'm teaching this lesson over and over and over and over again about the firstborn and about the blood. So if some animal kills something, don't just eat it and it's going to straight and all the blood's still in it. Don't do that, because I'm teaching you how holy the blood is, and the importance of the firstborn son, and how he is the one who redeems his family, redeems his people. Oh, okay. So we're done with Exodus chapter 22. Thank you so much for listening today. On Wednesday, I will be teaching in the book of John. Today, I'm preaching at my church. It should be on the Good Shepherd MBC.com. No, not com. Yeah, but the Good Shepherd MB Missionary Baptist Church Facebook page around 11:15. I'm in the book of Samuel. I think I'm in chapter 13, 13 or 14. Okay, so thanks so much again for tuning in, and I will see you soon. Wait, save that, and then end. All right, bye bye.